technically, escrow won't release your deposit back unless the buyer signs the form and the seller signs that same form.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Housing Tips. It's the show where we talk about housing information, housing news, and everything in between. If any of that information sounds of interest to you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We would really appreciate it. I'm your host, Eric, and joining me today is my co host, Jesse. How are you today, Jesse?
Doing good, man. Great morning. Feel rested, ready to tackle it.
I know, right? We have a very interesting topic today, don't we?
Yes, we do. Today's topic is understanding earnest money deposits. What is an earnest money deposit? What is it for? And what can happen to it? Um,
Fantastic.
Eric, what do you know about earnest money deposits?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me this exact question. But to me, what earnest money deposits mean very vaguely is, hey, you like a house and you want to purchase it. So here's a little bit of money to get the system started. But besides that, that's all that the agent asked for me. So I gave the money and then moved to the next thing. But we'd love to hear more about what they are.
Right. Do you remember, like, do you think it's a certain percentage or is like more better, less okay? Like, what are your thoughts?
That's a very interesting question. When we bought my condo and I was working on it, for me, I thought it was just a flat number. So we gave, I think, about 5,000 down, but I know it depends on what's happening. But to us, I think it was either five or $6,000, but it was a round number. So that's all I know about it.
Yes, so the earnest money deposit, EMD, there's a lot of different like names that people will use, but after your offer is accepted, that's the earnest money deposit is what's put in the escrow account. Your agent will be able to specify when you're signing the contract, it says, right, what you're going to open up escrow, what's going to be your earnest money deposit. If you read the contract, it says typically 48 hours where you need to wire that earnest money deposit, or else it's subject to cancellation.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
Right. So if you don't get that earnest money deposit in, or your schedule, right, with people at work, typically during bank hours, you run the risk of being canceled. Um, Typically, people are doing like 1 to 3% of the price. That amount goes towards your down payment or closing costs. So it's not like an extra amount. And it shows that you're serious if you put like a good amount, like, hey, okay, this person's serious, as opposed to putting, a lower amount. But technically, you don't need to give a deposit. Like
Oh,
I've done
interesting.
I've done offers where it's been 500, 100, you know, and it's not a requirement. Actually, a lot of investors off market, they're offering, cash offers to these individuals. They don't read the contract, they put nothing down. So there's no risk at the end of that deal if they can't make it happen.
Interesting. So is the earnest money something that, as you explained, it's not something that just goes away, it doesn't just go to the seller, it actually goes towards the down payment. Now, let's say something falls through and you don't want to purchase the house. Does that money disappear or can you get it back or what's the thought process on that?
Yeah, it can. There's so many like different ways that it can. I think the key word that I always use, and a lot of my buyers and people don't hear a lot, which is understandable, is contingencies. And when I'm trying to educate buyers, oh, we have this contingency, that contingency. You have to like really sit down with your buyer and let them know like what does that mean. So contingencies, there's different ones that you can use to kind of back out if you're not interested in the property, and you can keep that earnest money deposit and not risk it being lost. Like, let's say,
It-
for example, there's inspection contingency, appraisal contingency, loan contingencies. Like, what do you think that means? Like, when I say like inspection contingency.
yeah, definitely. And for myself, that's actually something that would love to discuss more about is that especially when you do inspections, a lot of people in the past during the pandemic, people would just give up their contingencies for inspections. And for myself, I know that's a huge thing where you go into a house, you have it inspected, and we talked about it in another video. We'll put that link in the description if anybody wants to learn more about contingencies. But one of the biggest things is when you have the home inspected and it looks like there's massive damage or it looks like the house is going to need thousands and thousands of dollars of repairs. That's something that's baked into the contingencies, but a lot of people were giving them up during the pandemic. But we'd love to hear your thoughts about that. And that's kind of what my thought process goes to when I hear contingencies and backing out of the purchase.
Yeah, so you have these contingencies, you have this protection in case you don't want to proceed with the property. So let's say the inspection contingency, usually let's say the deadline is, let's say 14 days. You have up until that time to inspect the property, to, look at, all the information that's provided. And if you want to proceed, you have to legally sign off on that contingency and release like, hey, I want to move forward. I don't have this protection anymore. I'm interested. I want to move on. The appraisal contingency, let's say, the property comes at a lower amount and you're responsible for, let's say you made an offer at 450 and the property only got appraised at 400,000. You're responsible to come up with that 50,000.
Wow.
And so if you remove it and sign off on this contingency, now you can't cancel based on the appraisal and say, hey, it came out at a lower amount. You can't cancel. You just signed off and like got rid of your protection. And so then the other main last one is the loan contingency. And that one is if you're once you're kind of assured that you're going to get the loan, things are looking well, you also have to sign off and say, hey, I'm going to remove this contingency and move forward. And a lot of realtors don't educate buyers. They sign off and later on it's like, ooh, this came up with your employer, or ooh, the appraisal didn't come through. You're going to run the risk of losing whatever amount in that deposit that you wired to escrow.
Wow, that's so interesting. I never knew that. I actually thought it was just something you just signed the paperwork. So like you said, having a good real estate agent can walk you through and say, hey, you should not remove it yet until everything is set in stone and then right before
Mhm.
the purchase, which is very interesting. Because for myself too, is that we released the contingencies. I think it was maybe a week before we actually closed, or maybe a few
Right.
weeks before. But we had the inspection go through, we had the appraisal go through, and the appraisal is a big one because, like you said, when you purchase a house and it appraises for 390 and you're purchasing it for 450, either you come up with $60,000 or the deal is null and void, which is very interesting.
Yeah, it's like having that information, speaking to your realtor that you trust, and knowing this, because if you don't, you can't back out with no reason or you're breaching the contract. And a lot of people don't know, when let's say you cancel, right? And then let's say it's for a good reason. Hey, da 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 da. Technically, escrow won't release your deposit back unless the buyer signs the form and the seller signs that same form. If we
Wow.
sign and we say, okay, based on inspection contingency, we don't want to move forward and proceed. We sign, that form, everything's great. Escrow's not going to release it until the seller also signs and agrees. So imagine if it gets messy, we're breaching contract, we're backing out for no reasons, we're requesting our deposit back. That other agent, they may not sign. They may involve legal and get their lawyer involved and looking to see what steps they may take.
Wow, that is crazy to know that having that earnest money deposit is something that's very important for both the seller and the buyer in case something falls through.
Yeah, so just lastly, my experience, I've had individuals, come up to me and say, hey, like my last transaction, I worked with someone else, I lost this deposit, or also like the new builds. I love new builds. I worked with great people in the past, but there are some new builds that have a system where contingencies get automatically removed at certain deadlines. So imagine like it's
Wow.
just automatically going, but if your file is at the very beginning stages of the process or something happens, boom, like you're lost and they're going to go to the next applicant and keep your deposit.
Wow, that's insane. Every time I see a new build, I always think to myself, man, those houses are so nice. I would love to have a new build, but it definitely comes with a cost. But as I always say, every single one of these videos, Jesse, thank you so much for your time. And listeners and viewers, if any of that information sounds of interest to you, please consider liking and subscribing and leaving something in the comments about what your thoughts are about earnest money deposits and any questions you have. We would love to make more future videos about that. But as always, my name is Eric, and this is Jesse, and everyone have a great day.